Welcome to Amy Learns to Cook. On the show today, we're going to make a delicious pie crust. This pie crust can be used for both sweet and savory pies with any filling that you desire. So you ask, why make a pie crust when I can just buy one at the store? Because if you are interested in making a homemade pie, part of that is making a homemade crust. Yes, you can buy a pie and fill it and throw it in the oven, but there's something that takes away from the feeling of a homemade pie when the crust is made by a machine. This pie crust, you know exactly what's in it, and it tastes unbelievably delicious. So let's make a homemade pie crust. Okay, so the first step to our pie crust is mixing our dry ingredients. And we are actually going to be making this pie crust in a food processor. It makes it really easy, and you really need to be careful because if you overmix your pie crust, you will start to develop the gluten, and it will not be a flaky pie crust, it will be a chewy one, and that's not what you want. So we are going to measure first 1 1/4 cups of flour into the bowl of our food processor. That's 1 1/4 cups of flour. Okay. And now we're going to take 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of sugar to sweeten it up a little bit. Okay, and we're going to put the lid on our food processor, and we're just going to get a quick pulse just to combine the ingredients. Okay, so one thing we want when we're making a pie crust is we want it to be really flaky. And this part is really essential, that you follow the directions closely. Otherwise, you will make your dough too tough because you will develop the gluten. And flour develops, the gluten in flour develops as you knead it and work it. And this is a great quality when we're making bread, but it is not a great quality when we're making pie crust because we want it to be tender and flaky. So to get that result, we're going to take a cube of butter, and what I've done is I've cut it into little pieces and then I threw it back into the refrigerator because you want this as cold as you can get it. Even putting it in the freezer would even be better. Because what happens is when we pulse it in the food processor and it's really cold, it's not going to totally combine with the flour. What's going to happen is the blade is going to cut it up into small pieces. And we're going to keep that little small pieces in the dough, and when we roll it out, you'll be able to see those little pieces of butter in there. When they melt in the oven and the crust bakes, it will leave it very buttery and very flaky because it will create layers. So we have 1 stick of butter cut into little cubes and thrown back in the refrigerator so it is really nice and cold. So we're going to add that to the food processor. And we are just going to pulse it a little bit to break that butter up a little bit, but not too much, right? Never turn it on, right? Just use your pulse button. And we're going to give it a couple pulses until that butter is chopped up a little bit in there. And what you're going to see is it's going to look like that. It's going to look like coarse meal, kind of. And now we're ready to finish the pie crust. Okay, so now we have our butter chopped into the flour. The next step is to add a little bit of water, and you need to be really careful because we just want to bring it together like coarse meal. We do not want it to come together as a ball, because if it does, we've added too much water. We want it to be really mealy, so when we bring it together into a ball, it will stick together, and I'll pretty much show you how that's done. So we are going to take very cold water, and what I have in here is some ice and some water, and we are going to put this in our dough only by the tablespoon, and then we're going to pulse it until it just becomes a coarse meal. You do not want the dough to come together. So we're going to pulse and drizzle. You need to be very careful not to overdo this. Try it again, another tablespoon. And this is the third. It's really going to depend on how humid, how dry your flour is. Every pie crust that you make is going to be a little different. So we've put in 3 tablespoons. Now we're going to check it. See how it's really still coarse? What you want is when you squeeze it, it comes together just like that. That's as far as you want to take this. You want it nice and sort of like cornmeal, right? You do not want it to come together as a ball. You only want it to come together as a ball when you press it like that. Okay, so now we're going to take a cutting board and we're going to get just a little bit of plastic wrap, and we're going to put the plastic wrap down on our cutting board. And just like we talked about before, you really, really want to be careful not to overwork this dough, because if you do, it's just going to get tougher and tougher. So we are going to use the minimalist approach, right? We are going to take the dough out of here. We're going to dump it onto our plastic wrap. Let's get the rest of this out of here. Okay, and we're not going to handle this very much. What we're going to do to bring this together is we're just going to use the edges of the plastic wrap, and we're just going to fold it, and we're going to be really gentle, and we're going to bring it together slowly and form a ball out of it, just like that. Have our dough. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to wrap this up really tightly in this, and we are going to throw this into the refrigerator, because you always want to work with your pie crust very, very cold. So we're going to throw this in the refrigerator for about an hour until it's really nice and cold, and we're going to roll it out and we're going to make our pie. Okay, so now that our pie dough is nice and chilled, we want to roll it out and form our pie. So we're going to put a little bit of flour. You don't want too much because you don't want to toughen the dough. And we're going to take it out of our saran wrap here, and we're just going to roll it out a little bit. Put a little flour on here. And we're just going to roll it out to the shape that we want it. It's nice and firm. Okay, so now it's time to finish our pie. And I basically took it out of the refrigerator and I let it warm slightly so that the dough would stay together. And I rolled it out using a rolling pin. So it is just a little bit bigger than our pie tin. And so now we're going to get this and put this in our pie tin. And the easiest way is just to kind of roll it up over your thing here. Grab your pie plate and roll it back over. And this is really a deep dish pie. And this crust will make a single crust. And we're going to be using this for a Dutch apple pie. So we only needed a single crust. If you need a double crust, then make a double-sized batch, right? So we're going to put this in, and you need to move this in kind of carefully, otherwise you'll get some big tears in it. So we're just going to move this down. This pie pan is really, really deep. Okay, so you're just going to move the pie crust down into the pie plate. You're going to take a knife and you're going to cut right along here just to give you a little bit of overhang. You don't want all this extra on here because we're going to finish the edge here. So we're just going to cut around here, and it doesn't have to be perfect because the whole charm of this pie is that it's homemade, right? So it's going to look rustic. Just going to cut around here and get this excess off of here. Okay, so we're just going to take our little ends and put them to the side. So now you can finish this edge however you want to. One easy way is just roll it under like this. This is a very rustic pie, so we want it to look rustic, right? Just roll it under. And now we're going to flute the edge just by taking your fingers like this and pushing. Except my fingernails are a little too long for this job. Make sure your fingernails aren't too long. We will have a rustic edge for a rustic pie. Trip me up a little bit because my fingers are a little long, but you get the point. Now, this pie is ready for any kind of filling you want to put into it. You want to make a chicken pot pie, you want to make a blueberry pie, you want to make a cherry pie, or we're going to make a Dutch apple pie with a crumb topping. If you want to make a 2-crust pie, go ahead and double the recipe and you'll have a crust for the top. So, delicious pie crust. Easy to make and much better than store-bought. If you like this recipe, please log on to my website at amylearnstocook.com. Also, subscribe below and give me a like because there's going to be a lot more videos on the way. We're also on Twitter at twitter.com/amylearnstocook.